Greetings. Welcome to ITR Live. I'm your host, Chris Hagenow, and we are live here from the Hendrickson Library at the Center for the Preservation of Western Civilization at ITR World Headquarters in central Iowa. You got John Hendrickson and myself here today, ready to thrill and excite you on the gold standard in Iowa conservative entertainment. Take one was better, John, but I pressed stop on the recording instead of just continuing on, so that's fine. We are here on a beautiful, although a little bit chilly, Wednesday in the Hendrickson Library.
Yes, yeah.
And anyway, so are you ready to roll?
I am. It's nice to see the sun today.
It is.
After a few days of a lot of rain and gray skies.
Well, John, you were the one that said it's time to podcast today. And I know you want to dig into what's going on with the federal tax bill.
Yes, yeah. It's a big issue right now.
Yeah, we do cover, I shouldn't say that. We cover national politics, but this is actually, even though not only is it going to make a difference on people's pocketbooks, there's a lot in this bill that's going to impact state policymaking.
Yes, yeah.
There's things that are going to impact state tax codes, state tax collections, legislation that's in front of that's been considered recently. So we need to dig into some of that. I kind of just wanted to start off with a little housekeeping. A few things that are going on as we move beyond the legislative session. But the first one is just because I really enjoyed this. Axios Des Moines today, John, had a bit about a consultant that came in to talk about the city of Des Moines low-income housing tax credit. And City of Des Moines should pause new projects until the suburban communities contribute a larger share to the metro's affordable housing. John, I live in a suburban Des Moines community. I don't want to contribute anymore to the metro area's affordable housing. I'd rather let the free market handle that.
I agree.
What do you think?
Yeah, and there's already a lot of existing housing programs.
That's right. Yeah. And yet we're seeing more and more where it's not even just trying to facilitate these programs. They're just straight up using tax dollars to fund them.
Is it just me, or I see housing going up all over the place? I mean, apartments and
right.
It seems like it anyways.
That's right. Yeah, it's just like we're going to be in favor of the free market handling these things, and then you're going to get the projects where they need to be, where the demand is for them. So Des Moines has gone through this apparently this big comprehensive housing strategy. Anyway, the Maine-based urban planning firm CZB came in and recommended that they pause this big new Des Moines program. Here's the quote that I just love, saying that developers can exploit the system in deals that don't always benefit the city in boosting its tax base as much as other types of projects. I'm shocked.
Yeah.
I wonder how much they had to pay the consultant to come in and tell them that developers are always going to come out of this with sweetheart deals, right?
Yeah.
Wow. I'm glad we got that. Or they could listen to us, John.
Yes.
We're doing it for them for free.
That's right. We don't have to.
And look, I picking on low income housing projects here, but let's not pretend that this doesn't exist all the way up and down the development ladder.
Yes.
Through TIF deals and other incentives. It happens to large indoor golf projects all the way down to low income housing projects. Yeah. Yep. And maybe we could just get government out of that business altogether. Yeah. Wouldn't that be great?
Yeah.
As we contemplate solutions to property taxes in Iowa, how about we quit just giving the money away to developers?
That's right. Yeah.
Okay. Yep. You with me?
I am.
All right.
Yeah.
Governor Reynolds announced a new, I thought I printed this out, John, maybe I didn't, but a new Childcare program on the heels of a bill that did not make it to the legislature. The business community in Iowa, and I think Iowans, many of them across the state, would say that there's a lack of quality childcare options. And I think that's probably accurate. I'm a few years beyond having to do that with my own kids. But this new program, I think at its core was sort of a trying to get the business community to invest directly into these childcare options, which I don't even want to dig too far into it, but isn't that really what we want? I mean, shouldn't the business community have to pay? If this is a result, if this workforce problem and getting folks able to work is the real challenge for business, then this seems like a step in the right direction to get businesses to contribute more to that solution, right?
I agree, yeah.
Now, maybe the ideal solution is they could pay their employees more, and then they could just fund it out of pocket. That's the ultimate free market solution.
Yeah.
But yeah, I guess I'm much more in favor of a solution like this than the legislature just handing out a bunch of new credits and expenditures to try and solve the problem on behalf of the business community.
I agree. You're right on.
All right. Yeah. Roundup's going well.
Yes,
you just keep agreeing with me? Is that really at the end of the day? Great. Yes, that's great. You're like the color man in Major League, and Bob Uecker's there. I don't know if you're familiar with it. It's too bad. Now they don't call him the best color man in the league for nothing, folks.
Yeah.
All right. Moving on. This is interesting, and I'm gonna throw this one out here, John, without taking. Again, I'm going to play Switzerland on a couple of bills here, but I think there's a couple of significant bills that came out of this legislative session that Governor Reynolds at least will be contemplating a veto, or there is a significant voice toward. There's always a chorus of people wanting to veto things, but it doesn't happen a lot. One would be this 911 funding change bill that came out of the legislature. And it's how that operates is fairly technical. And you and I don't even think would consider ourselves competent to talk through it. There's good arguments on both sides, but one is it has to do with the dollar fee that goes to fund the E911 system and where those dollars flow through. And I think at its core, there were some in the legislature that felt that those systems were carrying too much in surplus, and so let's make sure that the state and the Department of Homeland Security get made whole first. Law enforcement is screaming about this bill, and I've heard from several people that they're very serious about trying to get Governor Reynolds to veto that bill. I don't know which is right or wrong in that. I can't say, but that would be big. I mean, I think that's. Loud voices on both sides of that one. Yeah. The other one too, John, is I don't think it's a foregone conclusion that the governor is going to sign the eminent domain bill.
Oh, okay.
And look, I think the governor is a supporter, is a protector of eminent domain. I'm not saying that, but again, that bill, as I understand it, and I haven't dug into I've glanced at it, that there are some, even if you want to protect private property rights, that there are some provisions in that bill that are troubling. And so I don't know. I have no inside knowledge in that. I just know that there's going to be a lot of back and forth, and it's not necessarily just a slam dunk that she signs that bill.
I saw in the news too that another issue that we didn't necessarily get involved in, and one issue I honestly don't understand because I haven't looked into it, is there's groups wanting her to veto the pharmacy bill. The pharmacy,
definitely.
What is it, benefit?
I talked to a legislator yesterday that was wanting to go that direction.
There's possibly three major bills that.
Yeah. And the thing with the pharmacy bill is you've got I don't want to say the business, but there's a lot of lobbying interests around that bill. And we talked about that on an earlier episode, but it's really just a matter of what side you're on. I know the business community, if you look through the lobbying declarations of that bill, we haven't really gone through the mechanics of how that all works. But a lot of the business type groups were opposed to that bill because they think it raises costs. Yeah. And so I think that's another good one, John. I haven't heard on any of these. I don't know where she's coming. I haven't talked to them. I haven't hold no insider information. I'm just saying there's some significant bills to the business community, to Iowa industry, that are on both sides of these bills. It's interesting to watch. A lot of years, look, Republican legislature, Republican governor, and it's all pretty much, anticipated that most of it's going to get signed. But these are, it's just interesting to watch. Good. So that's sort of the housing, sort of the roundup of everything, not everything that we've been watching, but as we pick up the pieces from the legislative session. But we're now almost 10 minutes in, John, and the folks are just waiting to hear you talk about the big, beautiful bill. So I think most politics watchers are sort of familiar with this idea of the big, beautiful bill, as Trump has termed it. But you're better versed on this than I am. But at its beginning, this is the either extension or reconstitution, or however you want to explain it, of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act from Trump's first term. The Trump tax cuts are set to expire. And so there needs to be a bill. Otherwise, they just go away.
Yep.
And I think from a legislative tactic standpoint, and it's probably the right direction to go, is to bake as much of this into one bill as possible. Thus, the Trump-styled big beautiful bill.
Yeah. Yep.
So, what's in the big beautiful bill, and what are really the key pieces that are being fought over? And then once you're done with that, I want to come back around to the Iowa angle on this.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So, this is as you said, a big, beautiful bill, and it's a combination of a tax bill, as you mentioned, of renewing and hopefully making permanent the Trump tax cuts, the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, and but it's also a spending bill as well, a budget bill, and so it calls for increasing border security and things like that. Also, in terms of one of the controversial aspects of it is trying to have some certain amount of spending cuts in there as well to try to avoid deficits, which I'll get into that. But let's just look at the tax angle first. And I'm just going to read the key provisions that are in there. And of course, keep in mind, this is very fluid because this is just the House right now is trying to do this, and they're hoping to pass this. I don't think today, but before Memorial Day, anyways. Well, that's the objective.
Yeah, and as a reminder, they've only got a 3 or 4 seat majority. Yeah. Which, look, the Democrats certainly aren't going to give them a vote for any of this. So they got to figure out a way. And like wherever you're at on this, and I mean, they need to pass this bill.
Yes, yeah.
That's just difficult to get 200 and where are they at 220 something people to agree on anything, much less the federal tax code.
And so here's the big tax provisions that are in the big beautiful bill. First of all, it makes extends and makes permanent the Trump income tax cuts that were at every income level. So that's a good thing. It will keep the standard deduction that was doubled from before, and it actually has a increase of a $2,000 that's added. I think at a later time period. It expands the child tax credit. It has the keeps they call the this is something that our friends at NFIB have been pushing for, the small business tax cut, which is the 20% qualified business income deduction. That goes from 20% to 23%. The death tax is made banning that basically. 100% expensing goes through 2029. Research and development expensing through 2029. Some of the campaign promises are in there. No tax on tips. No tax on overtime pay. There's an enhanced deduction for senior citizens. Let's see. I'm not going to go through all these just for time, but no tax on car loan interest. And then interesting, it repeals the Obamacare federal excise tax on indoor tanning. And then the excise tax on firearm suppressors will be eliminated, and the opportunity zone tax will be cut. So those are just some of the highlights. The main thing, again, is the tax cuts, the TCJA, Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, and the standard deduction, because that'll impact most taxpayers, if not all taxpayers.
So, okay, several of these things, obviously, we support a lower federal tax burden. I mean, great. They should do this bill. Talk to me about SALT deductions, John. I want to explain this. Explain it to me like I don't work in tax policy for a living. What is this issue? Yeah. And how do you see it playing out? Yeah, and then we'll come back around to some of these specifics in the bill.
So prior to SALT, basically stands for the state and local tax deduction, where filers could deduct. Basically, it was uncapped before the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. It was a combination of property taxes, income and sales taxes, but not all the above. But And so then with Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, that was capped at $10,000.
Yeah.
Now, what SALT does is it basically was a benefit for high income earners, but it also more so benefited people that were in high tax states. And so, for example, California, New York, and Illinois, those are the states that benefit the most from SALT, and those are tended to be high tax and spend states. And so, one why SALT is controversial is because the Republicans from those states want a higher cap, and so they would like to see it repealed and go back to what it was before, uncapped. And so now there's a compromise that instead of a 10,000 cap, it looks like, as they're reporting this morning, they're going to settle on 40,000. And so
it's a big jump.
It's a big jump, yeah. And because they need the votes. And so basically that's almost similar to an itemized deduction. And what you could almost compare it to what we used to have, federal deductibility.
Yeah,
and it's not reverse. The same in reverse, but that's how it kind of works. And so, but what it does is it disguises high tax rates at the state level, and so it in a sense if you cap that, it then forces taxpayers in those states. So if you're in New York, California, you start questioning why are you paying such high state income tax rates, high state corporate income tax rates, and of course a lot of these states, New York, for example, is blaming the SALT cap for losing population. Well, it's really their high tax.
It's
bogus.
That dog. Yeah.
But it's their high tax policy that's what's causing the problem.
Right. Let's not blame the underlying high taxes. Let's blame that you can't deduct it off your federal tax. I mean, come on. That's lame.
Yeah.
Anyone that tries to argue that.
Yeah.
I think that's an important point. And look, deducting that state and local tax burden would benefit presumably most people.
Mm-hmm.
And at least anyone that owns a home and pays, property tax on that home or whatever. But it's unquestionable that it provides a bigger benefit to folks in high tax states. But I think this point that you made this morning we do actually cover important topics in pre-production, folks, that it does mask the sting or mitigates the sting of living in a high tax California, for example. And look, I don't want the tax code to force economic migration, but when it does, I absolutely am going to enjoy pointing it out at the same time. Look, the underlying tax burdens are still going to be there. It's still much more affordable to live in Iowa than it is in Illinois. Okay. But yeah, I think that's right. 40,000 seems very rich. It surprises me they need to go that high to buy off. Like, who are you sticking up for on a $40,000 SALT deduction?
Yeah.
That 10 or even a little bit more than that won't cover, but
well, they have a term they call this cartel federalism, where it's reverse, where the states, in a sense, are getting high tax and spend states have policies that actually work so they can get more money from the federal government, so they can continue their status quo poor fiscal policies. And so, one issue that, in addition to SALT, that's a big sticking point is Medicaid. And so a lot of states are incentivized to actually increase their Medicaid spending because then they can get more money from the federal government.
Right.
And so that just encourages this tax and spend mentality that a lot of these states are doing. And that's why you see Illinois and New York, California, all these states that are trying to protect SALT.
Yeah.
And this is why the president went to Capitol Hill yesterday.
I was going to mention
that.
Was
because one, he's trying to rally the Republicans to pass this bill. But also it's there's a big concern because the other issue is Medicaid. And so, because part of the bill, and I want to just reference a few points here because right now we're roughly spending at the federal level $7 trillion. That's a budget, but actually we're spending more of that because we go into deficit. But right now, over 10 years, if this bill passes as is, they're estimating that it would spend over 10 years 89.3 trillion. So let's just say 90 trillion. Now, the draconian cuts of this bill are only 1.2 trillion.
Yeah.
And so basically, the House is basically proposing, instead of spending 89.3 trillion, 88.1 trillion, and the Senate version is actually spending more, 88.9 trillion. So
it's about a 1% cut.
Yes, absolutely right.
Yeah.
And so as the Committee for Prosperity put out, they said, here's their headline: you'll need a microscope to see the GOP spending cuts. But in a sense, part of those spending cuts, they were looking at various policy committees such as energy. So they're getting rid of some of the Green New Deal tax credits from the Biden administration. But they're looking at Medicaid. And so what happens if you cut Medicaid is, one, it's very politically unpopular, as we see as even what has happened at some of the town halls of Senator Grassley and Representative Hinson, and but also if the feds start pulling back on those, that state have to kick in more for Medicaid dollars. So that was a big concern for many Republicans up there.
Speaking of the town halls, I did not put in the roundup, but a report that Bernie Sanders has hired a full-time organizer to round up all the people to go protest.
Oh, really?
At these I mean, give me a break.
Yeah.
Yay. No, it's all a charade. It's all ridiculous. Yeah. These members of our federal delegation should not be doing these town halls at all because of what the left has done to them. Okay, I think that's good, John. I do want to dig into how this impacts Iowa. So as you rolled through some of the different provisions, and frankly, these were many of the things that were in the original bill, standard deduction, all that. But anyway. We've talked about this before. In Iowa, we have what's called rolling conformity with the federal tax code. So if something is deductible from income at the federal level, it becomes deductible from income at the state level. For, the biggest one that impacts any filer, the standard deduction. You take this off the top. I made however much money. I take what's the standard deduction, about 20 for married filing jointly, I think.
I think so.
So you just take that off the top. And you do the same in Iowa. When you tabulate your Iowa return, you take that right off the top. Here's why that's important. As they tinker with what is taxable at the federal level, if they say something is no longer taxable at the federal level, it no longer is taxable at the state level unless they should decide to decouple. So there's a few things in here that would then no longer be taxable in Iowa. The standard deduction would stay, which is already the case, so not a huge change. But inside of here, some of the expensing provisions, those would couple. And the two that we've talked about in the past in the last few months is no tax on tips.
Yes.
And no tax on overtime pay. That would then be a reduction in state tax collections because those would no longer be subject to tax. Look, we believe in a broader, flatter, fair tax with less exemptions for everyone. So we're not crazy about that from a philosophical standpoint. But here again, the state tax base is being continually eroded, whether it's through new credits, new deductions, or new spending. The ability of the state to meet its obligations, to do the things it needs to do, and to be sustainable over the long term continues to be eroded through these little things. Is that fair?
It is fair, yeah. I think you're absolutely right on that.
We cautioned the legislature to slow down on the no tax on tips and the overtime pay for precisely this reason, because they were probably going to be in the federal bill. Yeah. And you may end up doing something that doesn't match the language in the federal bill. So thankfully that was set aside. We'll see what Congress does with that. Do you want to add anything on that whole the state impact all of this?
there's a couple points I'd like to bring up on comment on what you just said, because I think you're spot on. And, and we hear this on the property tax debate too about, there should be carve-outs for certain groups of people for property taxes, and, whether it's no tax on tips, no tax on overtime, what that does, it shifts the burden.
Right.
And so it makes it harder for other taxpayers. And it's just better to have, for going, for an income tax, it'd be better to have a lower flat tax, than to just have all these carve-outs, and then
somebody's got to pay the bill, John.
Yes, yeah. So
and
you're
if
absolutely right.
You start moving all these things around, somebody's paying.
Yeah.
And we just forget about who actually pays. We hand out all the goodies. Well, then the other pot of us, the left behind, okay, I guess we'll just pay a little bit more.
Yeah. And now let's just say if they did not, they can't come to an agreement and this doesn't pass, and the tax cuts expire. It's estimated, just roughly on average, Iowa taxpayers will see over a $2,000 tax increase as a result of this. And so, this will have not just a national economic consequence of higher taxes, but also at the state level, which will impact state revenue. And just as when the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act was passed, it created an economic boom. I think the opposite can happen if you have a massive tax increase. And so, because you're just not increasing taxes on individuals, you're also increasing taxes on those small businesses as well through that. So you're going to have an impact on individuals and small businesses. It's going to impact state revenue as well. So those are all significant consequences of this if this doesn't get passed or these tax cuts don't get renewed. And also, I think you're absolutely right. And this is why I think, even in our ITR principles of taxation, we don't like to use the tax code for class warfare.
Social engineering?
Yeah, social engineering. That's a better way to put it. Let's have a lower rate for everyone, and not just pick who should have less taxes.
Yeah, we want a level playing field for everyone is the guiding principle on that. Okay. So you mentioned earlier, and I'm kind of trying to wrap this up. I think there is a significant Iowa angle to all of this. We want this bill to pass. There's some provisions in it that we'd rather were not in there. There are some holdouts, and it's interesting where the holdouts are in this bill as they try to get it done. We think they'll probably end up passing a bill, right?
Yeah.
But you have some that are let's call it blue state. They're hung up on SALT. They want their provision in it. Probably not the most conservative members of the chamber that are asking for that.
Very moderate Republicans.
But you also have one, I think probably chief among them is Thomas Massey.
Yes, yeah.
Who is a deficit debt hawk that is like, we can't continue down this path. And he's absolutely right.
Yeah.
And he's going to be, I don't know where he ends up at, but I think both of those groups are the folks that President Trump was at Congress trying to talk to yesterday.
Yes. Yeah, I think Congressman Massey and Senator Rand Paul, both from Kentucky, are two libertarians and both what I call budget hawks, and I have to say they're right, and this is the terrible situation we're in because, again, if this doesn't get passed, it's going to have a terrible consequence, but it also is going to continue deficits as well as, 37 trillion debt and rising. And so those are serious problems that need to be addressed. And I have to give both Massey and Rand Paul credit because they have been some of the loudest voices, at least within the Republican Party, about wanting to limit spending. But there just does not seem to be a constituency to do that.
John, I want to talk about this for a minute because it's important, but I also want to file it away because I think we really need to build this out. That's the problem. I think you could probably get most members of Congress and probably many on both sides of the aisle to admit that we're heading down a path that is not only is it not sustainable, leads to some really bad outcomes. Whether it's in a year or 10 or 25, I don't know. But I don't think anybody really thinks that the federal debt is. Now, what they really want to do is immediately go to argue about whose fault it is.
Yes, yeah.
Is it the profligate spending on the left, which is only somewhat mitigated on the right? Is it tax cuts on the right, or is it lack of tax increases? Like what I don't, for the purposes of this argument, I don't care about that. I'm one that believes that we could cut quite a bit and then cut taxes and grow our way out of it, like we did in the other periods in American history.
Yeah.
But pretty soon it'll be so bad we can't even do that.
Yes. Yeah.
But it's a real problem, and the real swamp, I think, in Washington D.C. is that it's in no one's interest to do that. Where's the constituency for it? You have a few members of Congress, like you just said, that want to sound the alarm, but there's no political win that comes from voting no on budgets. There's a few voices that would yes, please do that, but these folks are worried about their next reelection.
Mm-hmm.
And passing bigger budgets and handing out goodies, that's where their reelection comes from. And nothing's going to change until the politics of this evolve to a point where the political win is or they're so forced to fix this problem or pick up the pieces from a broken system. And none of us want to live in that scenario. So that's a doom and gloom from me, but
yeah. Well, and I'll just on a larger picture note on this, and this is part of a larger, I think, agenda that the president's trying to do. And so, as we were talking about this morning, and I would like to see is sort of one is coming to some kind of stability on the tariff issue, and then taking that revenue from the tariff, using it to cut the income tax rates or put it towards the debt deficit situation. And that's exactly what some of the Republican administrations in the past did.
Well, I agree with you on that, at least on the second part of that. Mm-hmm. I don't want to raise a tax to continue to fund the ongoing spending. That if there is a fee or a tax or a tariff that's coupled with spending restraints, then now I'm listening, which is the same thing at the state level.
Yes, yeah, yep.
Shouldn't be raising taxes and fees so that we can continue to grow government.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. Yeah.
Now, if we're all talking about finding ways to reduce the cost of government, and there's something that goes with that, again, I'm all in. Let's talk about that. But once again, whether it's a state or federal level, and especially at the local level in Iowa, we just aren't serious about reducing the cost of government and tackling the spending.
Yeah. I think one I don't know if it's comical because it's sad, but I was reading about some of these, people are protesting like the University of Iowa's international writing program losing their funding. And then I read how private dollars came in and funded that. And so it just astonishes me how some of the protest is over this.
Because government spending is not the last resort. Too often it's the first. Whether it is the local developers that we talked at the outset of this show, or it's the folks that want to keep a particular project going, or whatever, Fortune 500 companies at the federal level.
Absolutely.
The federal help should be the last resort because nothing else works, and it's a critical service that the people need. But too often it's like, hey, we can boost the bottom line if we convince lawmakers that it's the only way this economic activity is going to happen. It's the only way this project's going to happen is if you give us tax money. And yet we see time and time again that it's all just a charade.
Yeah.
Guess what, John? Major corporations are going to continue to invest in research and development without government's help at it.
That's right.
They just will.
Yeah, yep,
may not do it exactly the way you
Yeah.
want, and it may not give a political win to a policymaker, but research and development will continue.
Yes.
And guess what? There's a shortage of housing in central Iowa. It will continue to be built.
Yes. Yep.
With or without the handouts to developers. It may not give you the ribbon cutting that you want if you're a city official. It may not give you the check in your next campaign when you're running again, but those housing projects will continue to be built. But yet maybe that's a new standard that we should look at. Is this a last resort expenditure, or is this just, hey, we're trying to put some dollars together. Let's go ask the taxpayers, see how much they're willing to kick in.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's offensive, is frankly is what it is.
Yeah. Yep.
So, all right. John, this is the point where I say, what else you got?
Yeah.
And we start a new 15-minute conversation.
Yeah. Nope.
All right. I want to come back. Let's do some work over the summer and the fall, John, on just the federal debt.
Mm-hmm.
And not just what drives it, but where we go from here. I think that'd be an interesting project for us to work on and talk about. We don't have the legislature in session, so we got to find some new topics.
But it is people should be concerned about it, and I know we've gone numb to it because we just keep hearing the numbers, and it's 37 trillion and it'll be 38 trillion soon. And what does that really mean?
Trillion here and a trillion there. Yeah. Pretty soon it adds up to real money.
That's right.
So, all right. Well, John, thanks again. Thanks for the positive, uplifting material today.
Yes.
And thank you for joining us, listeners. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Don't forget to tell your friends, leave us a positive review. And with all of that, we will see you next time on ITR Live.